Hi everybody, welcome to IGTV. My name is Joe Kincannon, and this week the focus is on fraud. We're here with Eleanor Spring from Spring Action Fraud Elimination. Eleanor is going to be talking to us today about employee theft. Welcome to the program, Eleanor. How are you?
Good morning, Joe. I'm fine, thank you. Good morning, everyone.
All right, so why don't we take it away? We've got a lot of things that you've got lined up for us here today. Go ahead.
I want to talk a little bit today about employee theft because as the economy keeps going down further and further, there's going to be more and more employee theft. Just want to touch on a couple of things that employers can do to help prevent the employee theft. One of the things, and I try to tell every company this, that they don't want to waste their money. They think it's a waste of money. They don't really want to spend the money to do this. Employee handbooks, they are extremely important today. For one of the reasons is that in the employee handbook, you will have it noted that no one is to commit any type of fraud. They're not to steal pens, they're not to steal inventory. All this is laid out in your handbook, in the employee handbook. It also states what will happen to an employee if they are caught stealing. And what most business owners do not realize is that if they catch someone stealing from their place of business and they fire them, that employee can turn around and sue the employer for wrongful firing. So it's very, very, very important. I can't stress it enough. Employee handbooks. Whether you have one employee or you have 1 million employees, you should have these handbooks in place. And every single employee should have a book.
You know, Eleanor, if I can just interrupt you a little bit, it's amazing. You have down here in the notes, the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners estimates that a typical business will lose an average of 6% of their revenue from
correct.
Employee theft. That's just incredible.
Yes, it is. And the figures go even higher than that for the most part, but that's a generalization. When you have these employee handbooks that you distribute to each and every one of your employees, you should also make them sign a form that they did receive these. So if something happens down the road, they cannot turn around and say, I did not know or I did not receive. Have them sign off on a piece of paper that just basically says, I did receive an employee handbook. Simple as that. Yes, there's a cost involved with it, but the cost is minimal compared to the amount of employee theft, the dollar-wise, what it can run a company. As Joe knows, I was just telling him I'm working on an employee theft case right now. A couple of civil engineers, nice-sized firm, not huge but not small either. Their biggest mistake that they've made that I've seen is they treat every employee like they're a family member. Everyone is free to come and go as they please, do what they please. Nobody's checking the records. Nobody's following up what's going on. And in this particular case, they had a woman who was doing the accounts receivable, the accounts payable, the payroll, going to the bank, reconciling the bank statements. This was her job. She did it all. And she got to the point where even the boss said she wouldn't let him near the records. I know, but people try to save money any way they can, and so these are some of the things that they do. I said to the boss when I spoke with him, why didn't you do something? He said, she wouldn't let me near the records. Well, this is not your family member or your friend. This is an employee. You are the owner of the company. You have a right to see what's going on. And I get excited about this because it's frustrating to see this happen and people just are not aware what should be done. This particular employee, for years this went on, 3.5 years, and she almost brought this company to its knees. They were in pretty bad shape. They were in such bad shape that they couldn't afford my retainer agreement. I had to wait 2 weeks and then break it down into 2 separate payments. That's how much this employee stole from this business. The other thing I tell employees to do background checks, very important. And I hear it over and over again, oh, well, I'll call up the previous employer. I don't need to spend money on a background check. You really do need to spend money on a background check because whatever dollars you're spending could save you hundreds and millions of dollars in the long run. So it is important, and you should do it. A lot of times what employees do is what they used to do years ago. They would take a resume, they would check out the previous employers, give them a call, and say, hey, how was this person as an employee? Why did they leave? Nowadays, employers are reduced in how much they can reveal. They're very limited on what they can say and how they can say it and how they can get across why the person left. So you really do need to hire someone to do a background check. And by the way, I do all this stuff, just so you know. Another thing is internal controls. As many times as I've spoken on internal controls, businesses just don't get it. Some of the things you can do to have internal controls. No one person should be handling payroll, receivables, payables, bank statements, bank reconciliation, trips to the bank. No one employee should be doing that. That should be separated. One person does the receivables, another person does the payables, another person does the payroll. These are all checks and balances you can put in place, internal controls, to take care of the fact that, and again, one other thing I just want to mention before I forget, if you have an accounts payable person, an accounts receivable person, and a payroll person, they should not all be sharing the same office. People who share an office tend to talk, and they tend to get very, very friendly. And so if somebody turns around and says, hey, you know what, I'm going to write out a check for myself, don't say anything. Well, guess what? Now they're all friends, so no one's going to write out anybody else. Everybody should have a separate place of their own, so whether it's just a desk and a chair or a separate office. But they should not all be hanging out together 8 hours a day. It just doesn't work that way. Another thing I wanted to talk about was you should have an anonymous tip line, an 800 number or any other number you want to give out to your employees. So if one of them sees something going on, they don't have to be afraid to step up and say something. It can be done by phone. It can be done out of the office. Doesn't need to be there, and nobody else needs to know what's going on. So that's something you want to think about. I can go on and on and on with this employee theft stuff, but people just, I can't get it across enough. Employee handbooks, number one, important. First thing you should do when you hire somebody, give them a handbook. Have them sign off on the handbook. Very important. Another thing, and this has nothing to do with fraud, but on these hot days that we've been having, people are dressing down. And unless it's written in the handbook how you expect your employees to dress, they come in with slacks, shorts, they come in with slippers, they come in with T-shirts. And that's another thing, and maybe you might not like it and you might want to fire them, but if you do, you're going to be in trouble. Employee handbook has a lot of information in there that covers the business owner. It'll be a great help to the business owner down the road. So you may not want to spend $1,000 for an employee handbook, but if you get sued for a few million or your employee steals a couple $100,000, you'll wish you had that handbook in place. Very important. Do it. What else did I want to talk about?
Well, there's a number of different things on here. I think you've really hit in a number of areas here very strong. You know, implementing those internal controls, I think, is absolutely huge. You talked about separation of duties, access control, authorization controls, and then, you know, the implementation of an anonymous reporting system. I think you're hitting that right on the money. Mm-hmm. But, you know, the other big thing here, which is the next item on the list here, is audits. Everybody thinks the auditor is their enemy, all right? It used to be the first thing in the police department. You took over a command, I want an audit. Why? Because it clears you, all right? And you could start off fresh and anew. But why don't you get into that a little bit?
Okay. I once worked for a company a number of years ago, just before I started my own business, a huge company in Manhattan. And they occupied several floors in this building. And every couple of months, they would have the employees change seats, change locations, change what floor they were on. And at the time, I wasn't a fraud investigator, so I didn't quite understand why. And I thought, gee, that's such a waste of time. But it really isn't, because you get comfortable where you are and stuff starts to happen and you can finagle your computer a little bit here and there. So these audits are important, whether it's moving you to a new area with some new people, or going through the books with you, or checking your software, what's going on the computer. All these things are very important in terms of audits. Now, you shouldn't just announce, well, we're going to have an audit. That's fine, that's great. But you should also have audits that are unannounced. Surprise people. Let them just not know what's going on, and this way you can find out for sure what is going on, and that usually gets people. If you have an employee who's so dedicated, doesn't want to take a day off, doesn't want to go on vacation, that is a sign something's wrong. You need to investigate it. Mandate that they go on vacation. Mandate that they change their seats every so often. All these little things can help a business owner and a company survive. Inventory. Inventory is a great one. How many times you hear about inventory shrinkage? These are all employee thefts. And with the internet now, I'm going to say most employees are stealing time because they're busy on the internet, whether they're surfing, whether they're emailing, whether they're on Facebook or one of the other social medias. This is all a theft of time. And if you don't want them on the internet, again, the employee handbook, put it in there. Put it in there if you don't want them emailing personal emails back and forth. All of this should be in your handbook. There's so many things should be in that handbook. It's important. I just can't stress it enough. It's important.
Yeah, I guess it does. What it does do is it sets up the guide, the guidance for all the employees and what standards and what policies and what expectations. So if an employee comes back later on, he said, "Oh, I didn't know." Well, then an employer can come out and it says, "Well, hey, look, we give this to you every year. It's in your personnel folder. You signed for it. What else? What else can you do to protect yourself? And as long as you're clearly articulating any changes that are in there, you should be fine." All right. And then it's up to the employee to say, "Whoa, hold on a second. I don't think I read that." That's a totally different story.
Right.
Why don't we get into the need to investigate?
Well, it's important. This particular case that I'm working on, one of the biggest mistakes that this employer made was not hiring a fraud investigator before firing the employee. The reason for that is I'm an interrogator as well as a fraud investigator. What I do is when there's a hint or a suspicion of fraud, I come in and I sit and I interview the employees, and they don't even have to know I'm a fraud investigator. I come in, I just want to sit and chat with people. I like to talk a lot, and that's what I do. And so I can come in there, and I can narrow it down one by one employee at a time, who is or is not a suspect in a theft. And that's something that needs to be done. And we also need to, this case again that I'm working on, my computer guy who referred me to this case said to me, "Well, a fraud investigator, all you have to do is just take the checks, take the bank statement. If everything adds up, voila, done, finished." That's not the case. The case can go so much deeper than that because there are files on a computer that people have. They have little folders with names that you wouldn't even think of, like the ABC company. Inside that folder, there's a lot of personal information. There's bank records, there's copies of checks that were stolen, all types of stuff. So an investigation really has to go deep into the receivables and the payables and the payroll and the whole 9 yards. It has to be investigated. It's very, very important because people get very creative in how they hide information.
Well, Eleanor, I think you've covered a number of different areas today, and you've done it actually in good time. That's employee theft, and one of the most serious threats to the success of a small business is employee theft. All right, as you say, the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners estimates that the typical business will lose an average of 6% of revenue from employee theft. Small business owners can help protect their businesses from employee theft and fraud by following some of the simple rules which Eleanor Spring from Spring Action Fraud Elimination, all right, puts out here to us today. 1, employee handbooks. 2, background checks. 3, implement internal controls, separation of duties, access controls, authorization controls. And 4, implement an anonymous reporting system. 5, perform regular and irregular audits. And 6, investigate every incident. Eleanor has just explained all this. It'll be up on our website later today. And we thank her for coming in for this hour of Focus on Fraud. Eleanor, thank you very much.
You're welcome,
we appreciate
Joe.
it.
Thank you.
Right. Bye now.
Bye-bye.